evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. The board has already met in executive session, and we already saluted the flag. So at this point, we're going to have a roll call.
Byrne. Here. Mrs. Werner.
Here.
Mrs. Gray.
Here.
Mr. Zen.
Here. Here.
Mrs. White.
Here.
Mrs. Richmond.
Here.
Mrs. Ford.
Here.
Mrs. Wilbur.
Here.
Mark Barron.
Here.
Mr. Sad.
Here.
Mrs. McHugh.
Here.
Madam President.
Thank you. On your agendas, I'd like to draw your attention to the statement of public notice. Can you guys in the back hear me? Okay. There are two times in the Board of Education meeting where there's public comment. One is earlier on in the meeting, which is public comment on agenda items, where you can speak on anything that's on the agenda. And later in the meeting, there's public comment on non-agenda items, so you can speak about anything that you care to speak about. I also want to draw your attention to the fact that the meeting is being recorded, as you can see in the back. You can read the rest of the statement of public notice at your leisure during the meeting. The board is going to move down to the audience for our public hearing on the 2018-2019 budget.
Good evening, I'm Rob McLaughlin, the School Business Administrator for the Burns Township Board of Education, and this evening I will be presenting along with Superintendent Mark Carrigan the proposed budget for the school year 18-19. This is our official public hearing, which is required by state statute. So I'd like to start with just a quick snapshot of a comparative, if you will, analysis of what the proposed budget is for this year, which is in this column right here. It's $103,095,303 compared with the proposed, actually the adopted budget, excuse me, for the year that we're currently in. So any of these comparisons that you see throughout this presentation are actual budget to budget. So if, in fact, and of course, as we go through the year, certain line items change, but the total budget remains the same, in order to have a true comparison, apples to apples, we give you what was adopted by the board last year at this time in May. So as you can see, overall general operating expenses are proposed to go up about $1.9 million. Capital expenses $300,000, which means that general operations will go up about $2.2 million. We're looking at a potential reduction in federal disbursements of about $356,000 and a slight increase in debt expense of about $7,600. All in, it nets out to just under $2,129,203. As we go through this presentation this evening, I'll drill down into these numbers a little bit. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, total general operations are going up $2.2 million. Where is that going? Well, in a nutshell, $1.675 million of it is going to salaries. The major drivers there are contractual increases with our collective bargaining units, the TEA and BTAA, the extended school year costs for our special needs program, and substitute costs. There are significant non-salary costs in this year's budget. There are 5 major areas. We have tech hardware, which consists of replacement of a significant portion of our fleet of Chromebooks, as well as significant upgrades and replacements to a lot of the technical infrastructure, including switches throughout the district and buildings. In addition to that, we are looking at upgrading the camera systems at both the middle school and the high school, increasing security in the entrance to Bridge High School, and district-wide communication systems advancements. Every year at the year end, meaning June 30th of 2017, we set aside money for operations in the ensuing year. We've been doing this for quite a while, and when you get into the slide that I'll show you a little bit further on about the loss of state aid, you'll understand why we need to do this to help balance our budget year over year. This is the amount that was set aside last June for the upcoming year. We continue to proceed with our significant long-term 5-year capital projects. This year we have scheduled here at the middle school phase 1 of the unit ventilator and HVAC upgrade project, which I'll talk a little bit about in a minute or two. We also have scheduled 8 classrooms, primarily at Liberty Corner School. There is one at Oak Street School that will have old flooring, including tile, and carpeting replaced with new VCT tile. As I mentioned previously, we're going to be upgrading the entrance area from a security perspective at Bridge High School, and we are looking at a ceiling fan project here for the cafeteria to help facilitate ventilation and cooling in the cafeteria here at the William Allen Middle School. So what are the sources of funds for this $1.264 million of current capital outlay? There are $413,000 worth of school development authority grants. That matches to this project right here, the HVAC project. Capital reserve, which was set aside at the time we had those grants issued to us several years ago in the amount of $620,000. So these two here are what make up this project. And then the current operating budget, $230,000, makes up the remaining 3 projects that you see right here. This is just a drawing from, I made it as large as you can, but you probably can't see that this is from Stiesel Architectural Group, which is the district's architect of record. This is a plan of the William Allen School, and these areas that you see in pink, there are roughly 18 classrooms here that are in phase 1 that are going to be part of the project that I just discussed. We will have the old unit ventilators in there replaced with new air daily units provide heating, ventilation, but also provide cooling. So the spaces that you don't see earmarked here are either the gymnasiums or the room that we're in right now, and either already have air conditioning or because of logistics we can't facilitate it with this project. So major factors in this year's budget include the fact that for the second year now, we actually saw an increase in state aid. All right, it's $247,744 more than last year. We were notified about that in March. The budget itself sustains all current programs and services. They're not being restricted or reduced. And the budget continues to address, as I just mentioned, our long-term capital needs with following projects: 70 corner Oak Street flooring, the Williams Unit ventilator project, and of course the entrance project at the high school and the Williams ceiling project, ceiling fan project. The enrollment in a variety of programs and staff, as well as enrollment in a variety of programs and staff turnover will determine considerations for additional staff. Okay, so what we have here is a 5-year comparison of our revenue, and the very first line item, of course, is our fund balance, which I talked about up front. You can see it's about $347,000 more than in the current year. This is not always the current revenue, but we're not worried about that in this particular case in terms of it supporting the current programs. As I noted in the previous slides, we have a significant amount of non-recurrent projects. We have over $600,000 worth of purchases for camera systems, renovation or upgrade, if you will, of district-wide communication systems, as well as things like the ceiling fan project, as well as the other construction projects. So a lot of that is one-time revenue that we set aside for. Not a problem. Maintenance reserve is relatively flat in the last 3 years. We're up about $15,000. That really is just driven by the mix of projects that we have in our capital maintenance plan, which we do every October. We just need $15,000 more in this year. I couldn't identify any particular ones. Probably a lot of little things that our facilities director actually has in there. The tuition and miscellaneous revenue item is down about $256,000. That's really because we had, as you can see here, a blip in 17-18 for one-time, non-recurrent, anticipated source of funding. However, not a problem for us again, because usually whenever we have those, we match those against one-time expenses in the budget. The general levy is proposed to go up $1.675 million, which is a 2% increase. I'll talk a little bit more about the implications of that from a tax perspective as we get further into the presentation. And then what you see here is an increase in state aid of $506,000. Excuse me. You may be thinking, well, I told you 3 slides previously that we got an increase of $247,000 this year. But keep in mind that last year in May, when we approved the budget, this state aid amount was then subsequently up by $258,000 by the legislature at the last minute when they struck a deal with the governor then to increase our state aid last year by $258,000. So the two together, this year's increase of $247 and the $258 we changed from last year are what account for this difference. But as I noted at the beginning of the presentation, this column is what the budget was that we approved last May. So comparing a budget in May of 2017, the budget adopted or proposed for adoption in May of 2018 is $506,000. We are no longer required to participate in the State Education Medicaid Initiative, which was a federal program that the state thought we might have some success with participating in. We've dropped below the threshold that they require us to participate. And so that is something that you no longer see here as a revenue. The federal grants have declined by $356,000. I mentioned that earlier on in the presentation. Really, that's driven by the loss of Title I funds. You can see that we're back now at $1,003.3 to a level that we were in 15-16 and 14-15. It was a 2-year period here in which the state did something with its statewide allocation that it's yet to fully explain to us in terms of how we qualify for Title I aid. It's now concluded that we no longer qualify for it. And generally, that Title I aid is driven by demographics that don't match with this community. So that is why they're saying we no longer qualify for it and why you see the 18 drop. The debt levy is actually relatively flat year over year. It went from $5.5 million, 102,000 to $5,107,000. That's a $5,315 increase. I'll talk a little bit about the tax levy impact on that a little bit later. It's negligible. We had a little bit of fund balance left over at the end of 17-18, which is being applied to pay our debt in 18-19. And state aid is relatively static. It's up a little over $550-some. So all in, there's our budget. It's proposed in terms of the revenue side, and there is the total increase in net revenues. So despite the fact that we did get an increase in state aid this year, and as you can see from 16-17, we're up $500,000, we're still significantly behind the levels at which the state should have, according to the School Funding Reform Act, funded us, which in total, the number to date is lost state aid in the amount of $18,731,000 for the community. There's an 8-year summary of tax levies. General levy is here, which is the major funding source for the district and also for general operations of the district. We're looking at a $1.675 million increase over the prior year at $83,751,501. That's a 2% increase. As I just mentioned a minute ago in the previous slide, we're looking at an increase in the debt levy from $5,102,000 to $5,107,000. That $5,000 plus increase equates to 0.1%, which means that overall the net increase of $1,675,000 and $53,15 over the prior year's levy is 1.891%. In the past 7 years, the district has continuously reduced its debt levy to a point of where it's now 11.4% less than it was 7 years prior. So we go back here and here, you can see that difference. We've increased our bond rating, and overall the net tax levy for the last 7 years has averaged about 1.76%. Average for the last 7 years. The anticipated tax impact for $100 of residential assessment is 0.019 cents per 100 for the assessed value. This is just a 5-year version of the second slide that I showed in the presentation, which was really just these two items, 17, 18, 18, 19, and the difference between. For anyone that ever wants to look back and just see how we progress in terms of general operating expenses, we've gone from 87 million here in 14, 15, 95 million. Capital expenses are going to vary from year to year, predicated on what the district's particular needs are given at the given time. Federal funds, as I just discussed, are relatively back to where they were. So we had a little bit of a flip here for Title I funding. We're back to what it was prior to that. The major drivers, I should tell you here, are the Individuals with Disabilities Act funding, which comes in at about $1,125,000, and then we have, $1,200,000, and then we have about $100,000 spread out of the various Title II and Title III grants, which are used to be called No Child Left Behind, and now they're called the Every Student Succeeds Act funds. The debt expense, as I just discussed, has continued to go down over those preceding years, and again, beginning in 9. This is a little further breakdown of what the general operating budget is. So what's the general operating budget? It's basically everything that we do in the district, including support services for the district. So it excludes capital projects, it excludes federal grants, but it's instruction, it's co-curricular programs, it's sports, it's all of the support that goes in, it's guidance, it's nursing, it's all of those things, okay? It's busing for the students, it's the cost of benefits for the employees, it's cost of electricity, everything that we do to operate in general, that's what these numbers represent right here, this total amount of 95 million. Instructional costs are split almost evenly between instructional costs and support costs, so I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. There's a breakdown of instruction between general education, special education, basic skills, and English as a second language, extracurricular, and athletics. As you can see, year over year, and let me start with enrollment, you can see that in 14-15, we were at an enrollment projected of 5703, and we are at a projected enrollment for 18-19 of 5284. It's a fairly significant difference in year over year between 17-18 and 18-19. It's projected to be down another 123 students. For those of you who were around for Dr. Gripp's presentation back in December, he anticipates, absent, of course, any new or future development in the community, that trend to continue further downward over the next 5 years. The increases that you see here are relatively minimal, but they are reflective and driven by the contractual increases. It's salaries, if anything. Keep in mind, however, you might ask, well, why wouldn't they go up more? With declining enrollment, the need for some of the consumable costs that go into instruction is less. You can spend more by remaining relatively static in terms of your budget costs there, simply because you have fewer students over which to allocate those funds. This is a fun slide that everyone always asks to see, but basically, if you go back to the prior slide where we're looking at here, $30,179,202. They want to know how that breaks down by building. Well, of course, now the larger the enrollment, the more teaching staff, the more salaries you're going to have. That means that the high school, of course, is going to be the largest. The middle school, the second largest. And then you're going to see the elementaries predicated on the size of the building and the enrollment there have corollary salary and staffing numbers. And of course, the supplies are driven by the same, by the enrollment there. So these are the second largest component of, this is the second largest component, I should say, special education of instruction in terms of costs at $14,420,000. Year over year, it's relatively static, just as it is for general education. The biggest reason that you don't see it go up more is that when we do the out-of-district tuition costs for students placed out of district, while that number of students is relatively the same range every year, somewhere between 37 and 41, the mix of students, meaning the placements that they're in, determines really what our cost is. So in some years, you may have placements that are in combination significantly higher because of the needs of the student, or significantly less. At the time that we took the snapshot back in February, they were less year over year. Okay? If it were not for that number right there, which is tuition, then we'd be looking obviously at a number here that's plus 240, and you'd have a better sense of how the salaries went up. Now, let's go back and talk about the enrollment at the top. Special ed enrollment, we're looking at it to be
slight increase of roughly 6 students. 748 is projected, that's all students in the district, whether they're in self-contained classes or not. And then the changes between these programs. There are no significant changes in the FTE counts. However, you do see significant swings down, down, and up here. And the driver here really is the movement that occurred on the part of the operational staff in terms of their alignment, in terms of where they need to be from an accounting perspective. Meaning, when we did this budget, we saw a big shift between 15, 16, and 16, 17. We sat with the child study team staff, and we reviewed the staffing that they had in each of these programs and aligned people in accordance with the programs that they were in. When we met with them again, this year, we found that a significant number of people had been realigned by their program staff again. So we put in place a process wherein there is an internal notification, because it's not as though somebody new was hired or somebody was let go, but they were moved from one building or one program to another, and we want to reflect where they're actually at. We, in fact, need to reflect where they're actually at for a number of reasons. We have to have a position control roster, and we also, under the NBC Student Succeeds Act, are required to be able to account for costs by building and by program. That is a relatively new change. That's why we've been struggling to get this done. It's really an administrative piece that involves a lot of how we manage to administer the personnel that we already have. But overall, there is no change in these programs in terms of their total number of staff. Now we have a 5-year breakdown of the support costs of the district, and this is where we do see some increases, and I'm going to go to my cheat sheet for that because it's just easier for me to explain it to you, but a large part of the driver here is where it's going to be contractual increases. So there's no FTE change for the health services program. This is really just driven by contractual increases for staff. In terms of related services, there are contractual increases. There is one realignment for Gaffney that when we went through and reviewed where staff should be, we found that there should be somebody on this line who's actually on one of the other lines. That's where they were placed in the personnel system, but when we actually went to look at the accounting system, we found that they should be moved to this line. And in addition to that, there is one growth position here. If I remember correctly, there is one, I think it's a speech teacher that we had during the course of the year. In terms of extraordinary services, what we have here are purchase services, and so there is an increase, if you will, in the number of one-to-one nurses and in the home instructional programs that we have for one or two services support students with with IDP, as do these services, which are speech and physical therapy. The next area down here, guidance services. We have a couple of items that are drivers for this $524,000 increase. Last year, after the budget was struck, the district was able to facilitate through turnover savings, which are always identified in our budget process as something that we will review at year end, and to the extent appropriate and that we are able potentially facilitate new growth in some areas. And one of those was the effective solution program that's actually operating out of the high school for social emotional learning issues. That is a $290,000 item that's represented here, as well as contractual increases in that line. And then, as I noted in the earlier couple of slides, there was the loss of Title I funding. So Title I funding was being used in the district to do a fair amount of testing between grades kindergarten through second as an early basis for determining students that might have certain language learning issues or reading and writing issues. And that program, as I said, from a federal funding perspective, no longer exists. However, the district did integrate into the guidance line $100,000 to sustain that program. After reviewing it with the lead supervisor in the district for the program, that was what she felt would be appropriate and necessary for her to continue the initiative. It had a lot of initial startup costs, which is why the grant was significantly larger, but was not necessary on an ongoing basis because a fair amount of the information and materials that we have are reusable, as I understand it. In terms of the child study team, the increases you see here are just driven by contractual increases. There are no FTE changes. In terms of the media center, the increases that you see here are really just driven by one-time unique supply chain costs. And they're spread out over multiple items, so no one item just stands out as any large chunk of that $36,000. Supervisors and improvement of instruction as a support area. That is an area that is represented by the following types of increases that make up to $324,000. We have a realignment of a staff supervisor whose duties changed over the course of the year from being up here on a child study team to primarily doing something that's more supervision and improvement of instruction. And also, we have the retention of a new contract for our student information system. So we've got a little bit of money in there, about $30,000 for contractual increases and for consulting, and then contractual increases making up the balance of that, really. Sorry, I'm squinting in the dark here because the light's not that great with these glasses up here, and I've got small print. My apologies. We're at Central Services. So Central Services has Central Services is the administration throughout the district. Primary driver here really is that there are 4 members of the BTAN who are coming on guide. So when you're hired in the district to work for that collective bargaining unit, you're not on that guide pursuant to the contract with that collective bargaining unit. When you do go on guide, there is a significant increase in your compensation in that very first year. It brings you in parity, if you will, with other comparable positions in other districts around the state. And that's one of the largest drivers there, as well as contractual increases. And there is, in fact, a new student information system coordinator in here as well. We did implement a new student information system in the past year. It costs us significantly less on an annual basis for licensing and maintenance than the old system. And really, when you add in that additional person to administer it, it provides significantly more enhanced services, reporting, and capability. We are basically budget neutral over the old program when we compare it back. Operations and plant maintenance is relatively flat at a 0.5% increase. What are the big ticket items there? Well, of course, all of our custodial maintenance and grounds staff, which are outsourced through Aramark. We've been able over the years to maintain a relatively static budget there with various with various efficiencies that we facilitated through that program and streamlining over the years. Our utilities are relatively static as well. They're obviously a large portion that represent close to $1 million of this, but they've been relatively static over the prior years, as you can see. Our budget ran from $8.4 million in 14-15 to $2.2 million. And there are very few other items that are that large that remain that flat basically over that long period of time. Our transportation budget, of course, is another one of those. We did have a little bit of an increase a few years back, but we're virtually static year over year. It's identical, except for $9 decrease. And I didn't plan that; it just worked out that way. The employee benefits number is relatively static. The big piece to talk about here is, there are really two. One is that the cost of Social Security and public employees relation, ERS, pension, public employees retirement system, are really the drivers for the increase. It would be significantly larger were it not for the fact that we're able to hold our health benefits, which are roughly a $13 million item, flat year over year because of our initiative to self-fund our insurance, which has been discussed in prior board meetings going back over a year. So that's going to save us probably over $1.3 million this year in terms of what we avoided in cost. Otherwise, this number would have been, $1.4 million out here, not $136,000. So all in, total increase $1,750,000 for support costs. Our transportation budget. So the number of general education instructional students that are supported by, that are transported in district to and from school is down slightly from what it was in 14-15. It's almost the same as what it is in the current year. The cost to and from school is relatively flat. There is a little bit of an increase here for the to from school contract. It's roughly 3% in terms of what we pay to the Somerset County Ed Service Commission. They are our contractor of record for to and from school transportation, both for gen ed students and for special needs students. This line represents the anticipated number of students that with special needs that are on smaller buses and have special assistance on those buses. And you can see here what the percentage of seats occupied is on those buses, and you can see here in the gen ed buses what the percentage of seats occupied is. We did make an initiative, as you can see, between 16-17 and 17-18 to be more efficient in our busing usage by consolidating routes, and that was one of the reasons we were able to remain at a relatively static level year over year in the budget. So even though we have some minor increases in terms of what we are paying to the Ed Service Commission for to-from school transportation, the other piece of the contract that we have with them allows us to have an agreed-upon procedures audit of their actual costs at year end. And when we do that, we're supposed to true up to whatever that cost is. We pay them this fixed amount, and then we have a set aside that we pay them based upon the audit. And going into the 16-17 and 17-18 years, where we didn't have any audit to predicate our expenses on, and based on our best review of all of the data that we had gleaned from them over the preceding 12 months, we set aside a sufficient amount of funds in our budget to cover those increases. And as it turns out, it's been sufficient to basically cover any growth as well in this ensuing year. So that's really the reason that we don't have an increase year over year when we're done, when you look at the overall budget. I don't want to spend more time on that unless people have specific questions. We can come back to it. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Superintendent Markarian.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Okay, so a few more slides. Indulge your patience a little longer. We'd like to just give a brief snapshot on enrollment. We talked about this a little bit earlier in the year in our class size reports when we were taking a look at what we might anticipate going forward with staffing, where we do have changes in enrollment in the district. You can see, as Mr. McLaughlin had pointed out earlier in the presentation, we're anticipating 5,284 students for next year, and that is a bit of a decline as we have anticipated with the help of our demographers over the past several years. We've anticipated this change occurring. And obviously, that does have an impact upon overall services as described in terms of transportation and the needs for staff. When it comes to making decisions about staff, we really have a allocation in our budget that we try to maintain over time to be consistent and be able to sustain the different programs that we have, whether it's staffing, transportation, or health benefits. We try to keep these cost centers relatively even. So in so doing, we have to think about what are we able to do with respect to turnover or potentially changes in enrollment that still meets the needs of the students. And when we talk about the needs of the students, there are some areas that vary a little bit from one year to the next, like the way students might elect classes that are elective courses. But we also have areas where students' particular needs are defined by their individual education plan. Finally, we have considerations for some things that are mandated that we need to take care of. So going forward for next year, we have made some moves that we're confident that we're going to be doing right away, and we'll cover those first. The first is shown here. We know that we're running a new course at Ridge High School. We're going to need 2/5 of the staff. Our staff members teach 5 classes. So when you see a 2/5 representation, that means 2 classes of their 5-class day. We actually have a position at the high school that's already 3/5, so this will be making that position into a full-time position. Technology education is something that's been growing a little bit in the district in terms of the electives that students have been expressing interest in and what we have been able to offer them. It's a challenging area to staff. However, we have posted this position and we have some viable candidates that we're working to bring in. American Sign Language is a program that we started a couple of years ago. As this program has grown and students are moving up in the levels that they want to elect in that American Sign Language program, we've had more students enrolling. And therefore, in order to cover all those requests, we want to expand this position by 1/5 full-time candidate. World language. So we're still collecting some of the student selections and trying to finalize exactly how these sections are going to break. And we may be in a position where we need to have a couple of more fifths. We're still not quite sure yet. As we move forward in the scheduling process, we'll be able to hone in on this particular possibility. I mentioned earlier that when it comes to meeting the needs of students with IEPs, oftentimes those needs are driven over their spring IEP season. As we go through students' individual education programs, we look at the hours of different services that they need in their programs and try to determine if we're going to need any staffing. So we're still going through that process right now. There is an anticipation that we may need a behaviorist as well as full-time OT/PT to provide services to these students. And there's a possibility we might need some part-time aides in some of our special needs programs. The last position, or area of potential position, has been a topic that's been spoken about fairly regularly over the course of this school year, especially since this winter, and that is about security staffing. So the district hasn't made any decisions going forward yet as to what to do with this area. However, the district has retained a consultant that is kind of auditing our district's procedures and policies and programs with respect to security and student safety. And we've also asked that person to help give us some feedback about what kinds of recommendations they may have with regard to staff. And I can tell you that they will be here actually 2 weeks from tonight, when we're over at Ridge High School, I believe, to speak to us about this issue. So that information will be helpful for the board. Finally, we have here at the middle school a athletic organization, and we are taking a look at the possibility of bringing the coordination of that program in-house as a direct Board of Education employee. So that is also under board review. We have to see if that is feasible to do. We know that it would have some advantages. Currently, there is a lot of work that goes into managing all the nursing and athletic paperwork and physicals that goes on with the many, many students that are involved in athletics in grades 6 to 12. So we are taking a look at that position and seeing if there's a possibility of creating some efficiencies and some more consistencies by having a little more staff dedicated to the area. And that's it. Do you have any questions from board members? Okay. Let's head back on up. Thank you again for your attention. Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin.
Okay. At this time, we have a special public comment on the budget, which I forgot to mention when I said there were two. There's actually three this evening. So at this point, if anyone has questions or comments on the budget, they can come up. If you come up, please sign in on the clipboard and tell us your name and address. If you want to sign in after you speak, that's okay, but don't forget when you walk away if there's a line of people.
So I'm here to talk to you today about something that we believe is of great importance to our to the schools and throughout Somerset County. So while it is often overlooked, the way we treat our environment has significant and often unintended consequences. And to protect the health of our planet for ourselves and our future generations, it is necessary to take action now and not wait until it's too late.
So while it may be starting small, we propose that Vernon Township Schools take the initiative to educate students and be more environmentally aware. This can be done through assemblies or additions to the health classes. We also believe that putting in place more energy-efficient infrastructure and technology in the schools would help the environment and ultimately save money again. So is there currently any discussion about utilizing funds for this type of sustainability in school? As members of the public and students in the school district, we want to know what steps are being taken to protect the environment for our generations to come. Thank you for your time.
Let them sign in and then I'll sign in after. Sherry Nelson, 195 Smokers Road. I just have a couple of budget questions. I looked back at previous year budgets. I've come through a lot of these presentations over the years and I try to pay attention, but then I go back to the presentation and I still have questions. It's presented in the same format most years, but I had to go all the way back to 2016 to see the per pupil cost broken out on presentation. This is the April 2016 presentation. Curious what that number is now, because we do see enrollment going down and the budget going up. So I would like to see that presented again, or if you have that number that you could give us, your per pupil cost for the new budget would be great. And then my other question is the security audit and the timing. I know Mr. Martinez just mentioned that we're going to get that in 2 weeks. And I see you're reviewing that in, I guess, how does that line up with the budget you just presented? Is that being taken into account that you might have to hire additional staff there? I'm just kind of wondering where you're planning money for that when you don't have the recommendations yet. And then it is my understanding that the police chief has already made recommendations on how many of the special officers to hire. And I'm wondering, are you going to listen to him? Are you going to listen to the person from the audit? Or the audit, is he going to work with the person who does the audit so they can make a recommendation together? I think that's it. Thanks.
Are there any other comments or questions on the budget from the public? Okay, so I'm going to close the public comment on the budget. At this point, the board has also a chance, if they have any other comments or questions on the budget, and if Mr. McFerrin wants to address a couple of questions. I'll let the board go first and then see if there's any additional questions. I think we all asked all our questions in committee meetings already. Okay, so Mr. McFerrin, do you want to address a couple of questions?
Is the per pupil on the user friendly?
Correct.
Okay, so after the board takes action tonight, we have 48 hours to post the user-friendly budget. So with regard to the question about the per pupil expenses, those will be posted on the website when we post the user-friendly budget, so you can check there. If you can't find them, shoot me an email, I'll find it for you, and I'll get it out to you. With regard to the security issues, I'd like to speak a little bit more about the security issues. It's definitely something that we've been spending a lot of time on, and something that we've been doing over the course of many years to slowly try to improve our situation with regard to security and safety in the district. There were some specific questions just momentarily ago about the issues of staff and funding, and I just don't think that the district is in a position yet to make any formal determinations. But obviously, there's a limit to what the district can afford to do with regard to staff, and some things that we might like to have we may not be able to afford. So time is going to have to tell there. I think there's room to do something. I just don't know how much that can be. Obviously, as with anything else, there are limits. We have invested in past budgets in recent years in our facilities and in our staff to try to make our district safer and more secure for students. Some of those investments have included improvements to our entrances. As Mr. McLaughlin noted in his presentation this evening, we're planning on investing roughly another $35,000 in improving the entrance situation at Ridge High School. The budget also denoted that we would be investing in our communication systems in our buildings to try to have more ways to reach out for assistance in emergencies. The budget in that area is a little over $100,000. There's a budget for security cameras at Ridge High School for another $120,000, and for William Allen Middle School for another $105,000. So you're talking well over $300,000 right off the bat in order to try to make some improvements just to the facilities. So the budget definitely supports the importance of this issue. How far it can go with staffing remains to be seen. Some other things that have been occurring already, even prior to the budget and what we have planned for the summer and for the 18-19 school year. We've talked a little bit about this issue in the past, but as a reminder, we've done things with 3M security film. We're going to continue to do that in some of our front areas where we have a lot of glass. We've installed a door-ajar monitoring system at Ridge High School. We've been experimenting with some different types of electronic locks to try to find something that might meet our needs better, and that's another area that we can work with the police and this consultant on. And we're looking at visitor ID scanning systems where we can take visitors' driver's licenses and run basically checks for outstanding warrants in producing badges for visitors. So we've had a lot on the radar with regard to facilities and equipment, but we've also done a lot with mental health awareness. We've really put a lot of energy into that, I think, in the last year. Not to mention financial resources with staff. This year we added effective school solutions at the high school, and we added a student assistance counselor here at Ridge. At WAMS. We're not at Ridge tonight, we're at WAMS tonight. So we've done those two things with regards to staffing. We've done the climate surveys with regard to all of the schools. We're planning on doing a stressor survey for Ridge in June. And here at William Manor, I believe this month, for all 6th, 8th, 10th, and 12th grade students. We're taking this information to try to do things that aren't just immediately tangible facilities or staffing issues, but what can we do with some of the staff that we already have to try to make programs available for students and supports for students. We're also working a lot on training staff and providing training opportunities for parents. We have threat assessment policies and procedures that we're implementing. We're also looking at programming and curriculum. We made some adjustments to some of the programming at Ridge High School. We added the Signs of Suicide program there. We've been adding mindfulness instruction for staff and students. We have our character programs, and we do a lot with grade level assemblies to try to bring in some things for the students as well. So it's an area that we put a lot of energy into. I'm really proud of what the staff has done in the last 12 to 18 months on this issue. And I think that the board has done a great job with the business administrator in trying to find funds to also do some facilities improvements. So a lot has gone on, and I'm looking forward to try to do more. But you know, as with anything else, there is a finite amount of money available in our budget, and I think the board tries to be responsible in spreading it around in ways that meet the needs of the students and address concerns to the greatest extent possible.
I just wanted to respond to the students who came up for the Project Citizen project. If you have specific questions or concerns about different environmental measures, you can email the board. We have a few questions on our radar for the Finance Committee to look at in terms of like recycling and some other things that have to do with the environment. So if you have specific questions or things you'd like us to look at or ideas, please send them our way. Okay, so at this point, we're still on this public hearing on the budget. We have, I guess, to move items 4 and 5 to vote on the budget. So would someone like to make a motion? Mrs. Gray, Mrs. Stormer seconded. Grace, please do the roll call.
Mr. Byrne?
Yes.
Mrs. Warner?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Sennett?
Yes.
Mrs. White?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Corey?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, so our budget is passed, and it will be on the website. We said in a couple of days, the user-friendly budget. If anyone wants to peruse it in detail in a different form, they can look at that version. Okay, we are now up to superintendent's report. There's 2 items, so someone like to move that? Mrs. Klein, someone like the second, Mrs. Goldridge. The first is the HRZ report, and the second is evacuation drills. Okay, so why don't we vote on those and then Mr. Manhattan can give his report.
Mr. Byrne?
I'd like to ask a question on the school bus evacuation drills. I don't think I know a thing about it.
So it was about 2 years ago, the state added a requirement that we had to post on our agendas when we were having the school bus evacuation drills. They have to do them twice a year at all the schools. So it's a new requirement to actually put them on the agendas.
So we've done that.
Yes. we're doing them as they happen.
Answer is yes.
Mrs. Swerve?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Salmon?
Yes.
Mrs. White?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Mrs. Wolford?
Yes.
Mrs. McHugh?
Yes.
Madam President?
Thank you. You said you had several other things.
Just a couple of bits of nice news to share. I was recently sent a press release involving one of our teachers. I'll just read it to you, it's brief. At the recent annual conference for the International Technology Engineer Educator Association, Frank Cacavalli's Technology and Engineering Education Program at Ridge High School in Basking Ridge was recognized as one of only 39 programs worldwide to earn the prestigious Program Excellence Award in 2018. So just congratulations to Ridge and Frank Cacavalli in their Technology and Engineering Education Program. As we talked about earlier, in some of these programs in technology education are growing and challenging the staff, but some kudos to the efforts of our staff in their work with the students. Another bit of good news, Barbara Retzko was kind enough to send me an update about some of the performances that had occurred recently with the Ridge High School a cappella choir, Voices of Ridge, Richmond, and Madrigal singers who competed last Saturday in the Big Apple Classic, and on Saturday, May 5th, 2 days ago, in the Music Showcase Festival in Hershey, PA. The way she phrased it to me was the results were a double sweep. At both of those events, they had 4 first-place gold superior ratings, outstanding soloist and senior Helen Shen, both weekends. Outstanding student accompanist this past Saturday was Albert Gu. Outstanding tenor section this past Saturday. And grand champion a cappella choir in New York City with a rating of 96.66, and grand champion madrigal singers this past Saturday with a rating of 97.75. So congratulations. I see Michael Fackelman there in the back, so kudos to you and your team and to Barbara Retzko. So congratulations to both of these staff members and our students at Ridge. Well done.
We're now up to public comment on agenda items. If anyone has a comment on anything on the agenda, now is the time. Okay, no public comment on agenda items. So we're up to approval of minutes. Would someone like to make a motion? Mrs. Swerner and Mrs. White. These are the minutes from April 23rd. Does anyone have any questions or comments about the minutes? Could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Burns?
Executive minutes, 1, yes. Executive minutes, 2, abstain. And regular session minutes, 4.
Mrs. Swerve?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
I was away and unable to read them, so I'm going to abstain.
Mr. Salmon?
Yes.
Mrs. White?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond? Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Mrs. Wolford?
Yes.
Mrs. McHugh?
Yes,
Madam President?
thank you. We're up to the Finance Committee. There's items 1 through 3. Would someone like to make a motion to move them? Mrs. Richmond and Mrs. Gray. We had a Finance Committee meeting. Most of the committee meeting is taken up going over the budget presentation, which we just saw, so I don't need to go over that again. The board members had a number of questions which they asked, I think all of which were answered and incorporated into the presentation that we had tonight. We did talk about the different staffing requests, and that was also incorporated into the slides tonight. That will be an ongoing discussion in committees and finance and personnel going forward as we move through the spring, as we get all the last information about enrollment in classes and see what we're dealing with. And we also talked at the Finance Committee meeting about which track and field use during inclement weather. This is kind of a follow-up to discussions we've had before. Mr. Markarian said that he had attended a meeting with Mr. Scheller, the track coaches, and some of the track team parents, and they're looking into some options that might help with the track in future years, and they will be reporting back to the committee and to the board with those options. I think it's an ongoing discussion, and they're still exploring what those options would be. So there'll be more information about that. And I don't know, that's about all we talked about. We mostly went over the budget. Does anyone have any questions or comments about the items we're voting on or about the finance committee? Mike?
Item number 3, the asbestos removal, where is that?
That's
It is the project that we talked about in the budget.
On the floor?
yeah.
Okay, that's good. I wanted to just comment on the track. The issue is how do you shovel the snow off the track so we can use it after a snowstorm for winter track, and I think also for lacrosse. And we're talking about coverage and things. We're going to talk some more.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
Mr. Byrne?
Yes.
Mrs. Square?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Sam?
Yes.
Mrs. White?
Yes.
Mrs. Richards?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Mrs. Wilbur?
Yes.
Yes.
Madam President?
Okay, we're up to personnel. We have items 1 through 19. If you want to make a motion, Mrs. Swanner and Mrs. Wilbur second. Did you have a report?
No, I already reported out on our last meeting, and we're not meeting again until 8 weeks from this Friday. Are there any questions about any of the items that we heard?
Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Byrne?
Yes.
Mrs. Square?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Sam?
Yes.
Mrs. White?
Yes.
Mrs. Richards?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Mrs. Wilbur?
Yes.
Mrs. McHugh?
Yes.
Madam President?
Thank you. We're up to the policy committee. I think it's meeting on Monday, right? Yes. Okay. Okay. Curriculum committee?
Okay. So I have a report. The curriculum committee met on April 13th. So first item on the agenda was an update on the Seal of Life Literacy program, what's new this year for our school. So this year, juniors and seniors in world language courses offered by the district and students in ESL were eligible to take the exam. They were administered after school on February 8th and on Saturday, February 24th and Sunday, February 25th. And 96 students took an exam, and overall 79% of students who took an exam will be awarded the Seal of Life Literacy. Seniors were recognized at the senior breakfast, noted in the Ridge graduation program, and a statement will be added to their transcripts. Ms. Stotler said the exams were difficult, especially the listening section. For juniors who passed the exam, the seal will be awarded during the first semester of their senior year, after it is verified that they passed their 11th grade English language arts course. And juniors who did not pass one section of the exam can retake that section in the fall. Ms. Stotler will present the plan for 2018-19 in fall 2018 at a curriculum committee meeting. We had a follow-up question on the K-5 English language arts program evaluation about public speaking in the elementary school. And Mr. Hunter said public speaking is a standard in grades K-5. And the expectations for students become more advanced through the grades. Students in grades 1 begin to use visual aids. In grades 2 and above, public speaking projects include living history, travel agency, and endangered species. Specific activities vary by building, and students participate in collaborative discussions throughout the elementary grades. The next topic was Mr. Hunter presented the grades 9 through 12 English language arts program evaluation. So the last program evaluation was completed several years ago, and there have been a number of program changes since that time, including American Studies, interdisciplinary courses are no longer offered. Honors English literature was added in fall 2011. The Common Core standards were adopted in May 2010, and all courses were aligned by fall 2012. The PLC structure was instituted for professional development, and the instructional focus shifted from teaching books to teaching reading and writing skills and strategies. Most of the recommendations from the previous program evaluation were adopted, and it was noted that one significant change was use of technology in the classroom has significantly increased. The department now has access to several Chromebook cards, and students and teachers use Google Docs, and student grades are now online. The committee researched 12 comparable high-performing high schools in New Jersey, including Princeton, Chatham, Milburn, Montgomery, West Windsor, Plainsboro, and Somerset Hills Regional. The committee's overall conclusion is that our school district uses many of the same curricular approaches as the other districts. However, Ridge offers fewer language arts classes than other high schools. Additional results are class sizes have decreased since 2011, particularly in honors and AP courses. SAT reading and writing and ACT scores have increased. And it was noted that there are private tutors involved in this as well as class instruction. Bridge students continue to achieve high scores on AP language and AP literature exams. Since 2010, enrollment has declined in the AP English classes, and more students are taking honors in grades 11 and 12. Several years ago, colleges began to accept only one AP English credit, so there is less incentive for students to take 2 AP English courses. And finally, the PARC results are not a reliable measure of program performance. So there were a number of recommendations from this program evaluation, including providing more individualized instruction and promoting growth models in English courses, increasing student access to diverse text and media, offering more ways for students to write and speak, investigate ways to increase instructional time, increase offerings of English language arts electives, and provide students with an assessment experience that helps them prepare for college. And I just want to remind the board that we have time to review the full program evaluation. We're going to be doing follow-up questions at Friday's meeting, so please email me. The next topic was mid-year performance updates, and the supervisors reported on various subjects, and basically in summary, there were no major issues reported. We talked about overall test length issues at Ridge, and 42-minute class periods are shorter than many comparable high schools in New Jersey. And in some classes, such as ninth grade social studies, teachers are splitting tests over 2 days to give students more time. Mr. Hunter provided a summer reading update. At this point, there have been 2 rounds of voting on summer choice books. And then with regard to English language arts enrichment, Mr. Hunter is investigating how reading specialists can provide instructional support to enrich the elementary English language arts programs to meet the needs of advanced students. So are there any questions?
And one is is there a report out? Have we received the report on the evaluation?
The program evaluation?
Yes.
Yes. You didn't receive a hard copy?
I searched for it.
Okay.
The New Jersey School Boards Association Legislative Committee met in Trenton this Saturday morning. Mrs. Woolridge and I attended that meeting. So there are several things to discuss. First of all, I want to go over the legislative efforts that are applicable for our district. First of all, the state science assessment, they're going to be moving it from 4th to 5th grade because it aligns more with the development of our students. That's going to be happening. Also, in July, we knew this was coming, the HIB code is going to be updated. So our Board of Education must hear any appeals from parents whose students go to private schools for students with disabilities, if that comes up. We've discussed that before. I want to remind everyone who hasn't seen this in their school board notes that the state passed the trash law, has been passed, for those of you who are not familiar with that. It requires all employees to have a review of their past history to make sure that employees with past infractions don't get passed along to other schools. So that's a real win for students in the state. There is a new bill coming up in November called the Securing Our Children's Future Bond Act. And should it pass, it's going to provide $450 million at a state level for county vocational schools, $50 million for county colleges, and $500 million in grants for school facility security updates. That's the good news. Of course, New Jersey School Boards Association supports this legislation. The bad news is they feel it's going to be years until this comes to fruition and it would need to be approved by voters. So we'll see what happens with that. For everyone, the New Jersey School Board Association, in conjunction with the New Jersey State PTA, is holding its annual legislative day on May 17th down in Trenton. It is a free advocacy event that is open to school board members, parents, and other concerned citizens to advocate on behalf of local public schools. Although it is free, you do need to pre-register to attend the program. There's going to be a panel discussion with legislators moderated by Dr. Larry Feinsod, the NJSBA Executive Director, and legislators are going to be in attendance for different breakout sessions. So if you're interested, both board members and parents, see me after the meeting and I have information about that. And finally, the keynote speaker at this particular meeting was Mark Magyar, who is from the Senate Majority Office. He works for Senator Sweeney. And he talked to us about the School Funding Reform Act and state funding. And the good news, as Mr. McLaughlin included in his presentation, is we're supposed to get more funding from the state this year. The bad news is there is a disagreement at the state level where Governor Murphy feels that the state education budget is underfunded by $800 million this year, and Senator Sweeney's office says we're underfunded by $1.5 billion. So they're trying to come to terms with this disparity, the result of which is we're not going to know for sure until June how much money we're actually going to be getting from the state. So it could be changed. And finally, as we always try to do when we attend these meetings at the state level, which occur 4 times a year, we advocated on behalf of our district on 2 issues. The first one being getting the state attorney general to rule on whether or not we can use days after graduation to make up snow days on unfortunate years like this one where we go through all our snow days. Obviously, the board priority is to never lose our spring break again, and this would help us achieve that goal. The Attorney General is not rushing to provide a ruling, but we've asked the school board council to push to see if we can get an answer sooner. The final thing that we advocated about was regarding park testing. For those of you who are not familiar, it looks like we're going to be using park testing at least another year in the state. And because of that, there's some great concern that's been raised by both parents and staff members alike that there is poor clarity on park as a graduation requirement. It's pretty clear for students up till 2019, but for students graduating after that, there are different things printed at a state level. So one of the legislative advocates on the New Jersey School Board Association staff has taken all of our concerns and is going to help us run these issues. If we're going to continue using CART for another year or two, the least they can do is give us clarity on what the students need to know to graduate. So I think that's it. Any questions? Don't look so bored. I'm doing my best here.
Fascinating. Thank you. Thank you guys for going down there on Saturday, spending the day down there. Okay, we're up to the ad hoc SEL committee.
The committee met last Monday, the 30th, and I'll be reporting out at the meeting on the 21st.
Okay, at this point, we're up to public comment on non-agenda items. I just want to remind you, if you come up to sign your name and address on the clipboard and tell us your name and address when you come up to the microphone, please. Thank you.
Can you hear me? No?
Closer?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you. My name is Nessa Rossi, and I live at 14 Culberson Road in Basking Ridge. First, I want to thank the board for hiring a firm to conduct a security audit to identify vulnerabilities in each of our schools. I look forward to the presentation on May 21st. I also want to thank the board for allocating around $300,000 to security expenses as it relates to facilities. As I've stated in the past, I'm a member of GRASS, Bournemouth Residents Advocating School Safety. We've met with the Board of Ed, some Board of Ed members, township committee members, Police Chief Mike Shimsky, Prosecutor Mike Robertson, Director of Counseling Julian Chavis, to discuss what we as parents can do to support the district's efforts in both security and social emotional learning. As you are aware, many parents have spoken at various BOE meetings and sent emails regarding these issues. I understand that there are many competing priorities. However, as a parent, it is very frustrating that a decision has not been made to hire 6 SLEOs, one for each of our schools. Other than hiring a firm to conduct a security audit, the understanding by many concerned parents is that no action has been taken. While preliminary measures have been taken as it pertains to a security audit, there's been lack of transparency on a definitive timeline to hire the SLEOs that this district desperately needs. As I've stated in the past, roles and responsibilities of these officers go beyond security and patrolling our hallways. It includes drug awareness, suicide prevention, checking ID at school entrances, partnering with the facilities directors to ensure schools are secure, and the list goes on. Law enforcement in our town has recommended to hire 6 SLEOs, one for each of our schools, while also keeping 1 SRO in our high school and 1 in our middle school. Why has this not been approved by the Board of Ed? Why have the positions not been posted? Why is Basking Ridge behind all of our neighboring towns? An audit is not needed to tell you that our schools need officers. Those are 2 separate issues. Randolph, Jefferson, Roxbury, those school districts all have retired police officer programs. Mount Olive hired 2 SROs and at least 4 SLEOs. Marv School District is hiring 10 officers. New Providence just announced that they're hiring 1 resource officer for each of their schools. Franklin is hiring 14 officers. Sparta just announced that they're hiring a SRO and 3 armed guards. They already have 2 armed guards. The cost of the SRO is being split between the township and the Board of Ed. These are just a few examples of schools that are taking action and making school security a priority. How many is Basking Ridge hiring? At the February 26th Board of Ed meeting, it was stated that school security is a priority, the top priority for the district. How can that be if no action has been taken to hire these officers? An SLEO costs between $40,000 and $50,000. We need 6 of them. That totals $240,000 to $300,000, or less than 1/4 of 1% of the total budget. This is not too much to ask for. This is a necessity and recommended by the Somerset County freeholders. Actually, the recommendation by the Somerset County freeholders is to have a minimum of 1 SRO in each of your schools. And we're just begging you to hire SLEOs. Is school security a top priority for our district? With all due respect, the Board of Ed needs to take action. Do you want the unthinkable to happen when we don't have officers in our schools? I'm certain the answer is no. We need to do something. We need to stop dragging our feet on something that's a top priority for our district. Myself and others have also publicly stated that we were willing to partner with you, from research to planning to funding. I've also personally sent an email to Mr. Marquardt asking for a meeting to discuss how we can partner together to fund this. I will work with you. I'm still awaiting a response. As a community, we will come together, see us parents as resources. We're willing to help. What if we started a GoFundMe page and raised $300,000 with upwards of $1 million? That would cover a year or two of 6 SAOs, and then you'd also be able to hire the more than needed student counselors in our district. School security is us being reactive, and student wellness is us being proactive to our children's social and emotional learning. I strongly urge the Board of Ed to partner with the Council Committee to figure this out. We need to implement what law enforcement in our town has recommended. 6 SLEOs in addition to our 2 current SROs. Between the Board of Ed and the Township Committee budgets, there's around $145 million. Are you telling us, parents, that you can't partner together and find $300,000 out of $145 million to fund something that's a top priority for our district?
Excuse me, ma'am. You've got about, I didn't want to interrupt you, but you've got about 45 seconds.
I'm done in 10. We need these positions posted and officers in place for the 2018-2019 school year, effective 2018. Thank you for taking action for this top priority for our district.
Hi, my name is Cindy Shapiro, and I'm a junior who is currently completing my project citizen assignment. Student mental health and stress. I, along with 7 other rich juniors, with the exception of 1 senior, are very passionate about this topic and want to make a difference in our school community, and hopefully we can impact on other schools as well.
Hi, my name is Ella Trudeau. 1 in 5 students ages 13 to 18 are diagnosed with a mental health disorder. As the amount of adolescents suffering from mental illness increase exponentially, the awareness, acceptance, and resources of and for the issue remain insufficiently stagnant. Students are incredibly disappointed by the lack of acknowledgement from our school community for these issues. And while we are incredibly appreciative of the efforts of the board and the other members of the community about awareness for this issue, we feel like it hasn't been enough. We believe that the voices of the students may offer further changes to benefit our community and our school who has suffered needlessly.
Hi, my name is Alicia, and so far the steps we've taken is we've created an Instagram page and we've created a petition. We have around 70 signatures and would like to get about 100. We plan to email Senator Lance explaining our problems and ask for advice as he is part of the mental health awareness organization as well. 2 of our members, Bella and Mary, got the opportunity to speak to Senator Lance at a school event and explain our project to spread awareness on the issue, and hopefully this will help incentive to vote our favor on mental health reform.
Hi, my name is Mary Shea. Our mission is to create a home and writing a properly structured mental health curriculum by removing stigmas against mental health disorders from it and taking a new approach to the topic. We want mental health to be a more approachable topic for teachers educating their students to discuss, and we would like the topic to be more friendly and less difficult for students to understand. I hope you see through our efforts the importance of this cause to us as students, and the support of the teacher steps that we reach them. Thank you for your time.
Hi, folks. My name is Steve Breslow, 38 Watchman Drive in Baskin Ridge. I'm a parent of 2 great kids, one in college, one still at the high school. My wife Debbie and I are very thankful for the education that our kids have received in this district and for the dedication of teachers and staff, which doesn't often get recognized. Full disclosure, I'm a teacher as well, second career. I work in the math department at Milburn High School. I currently teach a financial literacy-based course for seniors and a geometry accelerated course, mostly freshmen and sophomores. As an aside, did you happen to know Milburn staff has been working without a new contract since last June? It's been very challenging just having the Milburn Board of Ed meet at the negotiating table. Regardless of the issues or the eventual outcome, I know that I go into work every day, often every night, and quite frequently each weekend as well, with the same approach. What can I do to help create an environment where my students can thrive? How can I guide them while partnering with their families to ensure that they develop their sense of curiosity, their creativity, their compassion, and their thirst for learning? I'm hopeful that this is also the approach taken by teachers in this district. However, I'm not convinced. Kids aren't robots. For some reason, many teachers feed into the notion that only those with the highest grades are successful. They'll say, if my students don't get in the high 90s, then they don't belong here. I would argue that any student that enjoys the challenge, that participates fully in the team environment that high-level courses often promote, that are creative and confident, and that actually uses mistakes as a learning opportunity instead of a threat to their Johns Hopkins summer program, belong in this classroom. That's how I run my classes, and certainly what I try to build within my Geometry Excel course, one of the most wonderful and